I know a lot of people would like to have the success of Tony Robbins, and what makes Tony so incredibly successful? Why is he able to fill an auditorium? Why does Tony have the income stream that he has, the annual sales he has, the volume he has? What makes him different? And to me, it's somewhat paradoxical that the NLP community so enthusiastically talks about modeling, yet I don't see anybody effectively modeling much of what Tony's doing. And clearly there's some things about what he's doing that are just, they're non-transportable, they're non-modelable, because they involve so much of the context, which is a very costly, difficult context to maintain. But there are some things that Tony does talk about, and there are clear distinctions he makes. The very idea of distinctions, by the way, comes from a language philosopher and former finance minister of Chile, Dr. Fernando Flores, who is a guy that worked with Terry Winograd and developed this philosophy of language into action. So when we talk about distinctions, there is a genealogy, there's a history to this concept of distinctions and the importance of making distinctions, how the mind distinguishes, how we use language to distinguish. Okay, Tony makes a distinction, and his distinction is called KAIZEN, okay? KAIZEN is a Japanese idea that comes from manufacturing industries that means continuous improvement. So the question I'm going to pose is, how, as in what processes you're employing, do you practice Kaizen? How are you involved in the process of continuous improvement? Okay? So where I'm going with that is, I see thought process and thinking as something that is continuously improved. Thinking is something that is continuously tested. We take ideas, like I ran a little thing about 4 uploads on YouTube ago about chunking up. And I noticed, to my minor surprise, that not that many people had really looked at it or thought about it. And I think, well, what prevented this community that seems to be very involved in the idea of improving their NLP and understanding NLP and enlarging NLP, didn't want to go and think about chunking up? It didn't seem like it was a significant point to consider. Fine, that's okay, I understand. But what if you had? And what if you'd taken a few minutes and engaged the idea and perhaps involved in a little Kaizen around the idea of chunking up or chunking down or any other concept? So what I'm not seeing, I think, in a lot of the general community of NLP is Kaizen, that very, very critical distinction that Tony Robbins makes. The reason that Tony's Tony and we're not Tony, okay, that's pretty evident. Because Tony, for whatever his limitations may be, very much believes in Kaizen, which is taking ideas and retesting them, rebuilding on them, keeping the process of re-examination and rigorously rethinking. All right. What types of challenges do you place before the assumptions you are continuously making? And trust me on this, you are continuously making assumptions. You're making a lot of assumptions about who I am and the validity of the things I'm saying and the context that's in. You're making a lot of assumptions about who you are and what your place in the world is and what your capacities in the world. Well, my question to you is, how do you test those assumptions? And how often do you test those assumptions? And how many new, fresh, and enlightening ways do you go about looking at those assumptions from other angles? Are you even aware of your process for forming assumptions? And the final question, I think, is very, very important, quite critical, is the identity component. The way you form assumptions, the process by which you are forming assumptions, is the process by which you are constructing your identity. Identity and assumption forming are tightly interrelated processes. So if you want to start experiencing identity level changes, you have got to start experiencing deep kaizen of your assumptions, deep continuous updating, and deep continuous reflecting, and remodeling of assumptions and remodeling of the way you're mapping the world in a broad way. And I really don't think that meaningful, substantive change can occur, no matter what one says, no matter what one claims one's commitments are, no matter what vocabulary one runs, no matter what costumes one puts on, etc. As long as you're still forming the same assumptions in the same way, you are going to be continuously regenerating yourself and your identity foundationally in the same way. So take that challenge on. Really think about that, and think about, how am I doing this? How am I assuming? How many books am I judging by their covers? How many arguments am I judging by the form or the style of the delivery? How many things am I just watching and taking on because they're beautifully presented, but perhaps they're intellectually or philosophically vacuous statements? Can you distinguish between the vacuous, the trivial, the substantive, and the life-changing? I think that maybe the problem with our culture is that those distinctions are not clearly made, and people are given the most trivial, cartoonish kind of thinking, but it's so beautifully packaged that they think this is profundity, or this is significance, and thinking often that seems like it's kind of dull or marginal might actually have the greatest liberating power. Okay, that's it for the Toad Cam, and I'll be bugging you tomorrow.